Hey guys, and welcome. So at about 6:15, we're gonna start running through this agenda as people are filtering in, having some snacks, writing some questions. But yeah, here's our little schedule for the day. So again, thank you all so much for coming. This is super cool to see all these people turning out for public education in Vermont.
Who are you?
Oh yes, thank you. I'm Matt Kyle. I'm the librarian for the school district. And I've been involved with Vermont Schools Workers United that we've been sort of organizing some of these across the state. But I'm actually happy to host this one in my own little space, actually. This is great. So thank you and welcome to the Winooski School District. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the Winooski School District. We are so excited to have people turning out for public education in Vermont. So I'm passing Amy, who's going to introduce some of our amazing students.
Hi, I'm Andy Schneider. I'm a teacher here at Winooski School District, and I'm here to introduce a couple of our great students who are going to talk about public education. This is Eliza Willis and Albina Rai. Good evening, everyone. As Miss Andy introduced me, I am Albina Rai, and I'm a junior here at Winooski High School. As an immigrant, I came to Winooski when I was in first grade. As a multilingual learner, I relied heavily on my trained ML teachers, small class sizes, and district MLL liaisons for support. One thing that deeply concerns me about the governor's proposed plan is that it drastically cuts funding for students like me. This is not good. Multilingual students deserve to feel supported in schools, and schools need the funding to make this happen. No matter what plan moves forward, I want adequate funding for multilingual students like me. They are the heart of what makes Winooski special, and any plan moving forward must give that proper funding to students like me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eliza Willis, and I'm a junior at Winooski High School. The proposed plan from the state mandates that classes have a minimum of 25 students. This requirement would impact all of my current classes, especially those unique to my school, such as culture and community. My teacher, Miss Annie, is my teacher for that class, where I'm working to implement a composting project. It would also limit my ability to take demanding courses like AP World History, where my class size is pretty small. In a state like Vermont, where we have small schools, requirements for classes would impact students like me who want to enroll in rigorous courses. Thankfully, the proposed plan from the House allows AP courses and others to be excluded from the House's proposed 18 student minimum for grades 5 through 12. This is a good thing. Still, the small community at Winooski High School tremendously helped me as a student, and I would hate to see that change. Please consider how the decisions you're making affects your students. Thank you for your time.
I'm really glad that we opened with Voices of Students, because that is why we're here. I'm Stephanie Sleeper. I'm a teacher at Mansfield High School, and I also work as an equity coach there. And I've been working to help organize this town hall tonight. I'm so excited to see so many people. We have legislators here to hear about what you think about Vermont education. So I wanted to give a little bit of an opening to think about some of those questions that you were asked in the hallway. You may have or may not have seen. One of the questions that we'd like you to think about, and I believe we're going to hand some Post-its out if you didn't get a chance to see the question about what questions you might have for the legislators who are here tonight about the bill. So the first thing we're going to do is explain a little bit of what is in Governor Scott's proposed bill, and then the very recent updates that the Education Committee and the House has made. We have a little bit of detail on that as far as we know. We're going to hear some more perspectives. We've heard from our wonderful students. We will hear from our 2025 Vermont Teacher of the Year, and a couple of parents and administrators administrator, and then about an alternate funding plan from Steph Yu, who works for public assets. You will have a chance to ask questions of legislators who are here. We will also take some questions from people who are attending on Zoom and get some feedback, and then we have some kind of steps to take if you want to know more or you want to express how you're feeling to your particular legislators if they're not here tonight. So just to open, a little bit of our objectives tonight, right? We're hoping to share some of our experiences from all of our diverse perspectives about public education in Vermont, including our challenges, but also our strengths. We would like to learn about some of the proposed changes to public education in Vermont, to be able to ask questions, share some feedback, and especially to chart an equitable and sustainable future for our schools. As we are going to be hearing some very personal stories tonight, we'd like to make sure that we all are thinking about some of these community agreements to make this a space that we can all share, to take space, but also make space for others to speak, to listen to understand and not necessarily just respond, to speak from our own experiences, to be aware of our intent and the impact of what we say, and to care for ourselves and everyone who is here. So some key elements of the plan as it was introduced to the legislature in January, there are three kind of key things to know. And the one is probably one that you've heard a lot about. There was a map that came out, it's on the next slide. The plan was, at least as it stood, to consolidate the 100 plus school districts in Vermont to 5. And as part of that, there would be an increase in minimum class sizes. The way that is formulated would change. And because of those minimum class sizes, it is highly likely that some schools would close. The one thing that I noted when I read over the plan, and I prepared a little summary of what's in this plan as well as the amended version that's linked on the last slide if you'd like to see that. But what struck me is not only the large size of the Champlain Valley District, which is more than twice as big as the other 4 districts, but that it would provide only 5 board members, which, coming from Mount Mansfield Union School District, we had a little bit of drama over our consolidation a few years ago with, we have at least quite a large board for our small area, 15 board members, just for my district. And I'm imagining that your districts are similar in size of the board. And going to 5 would really prioritize our bigger towns, right? Because they're all at large, they would be all at large. And so, the representation from smaller towns would be challenging. And in general, that leads to point number 2, right? It really reduces local control. What I noticed in reading the bill is the amount of power that is given to the Agency of Education and the Secretary of Education to decide a lot of what is generally decided at either the local district level or regional level currently. Statewide school calendar, mandatory professional development for staff, learning targets, standards, graduation requirements, and the power to close schools, to take over schools who are not meeting their yearly progress or not meeting their improvement plans, really took what I noticed was taking away a lot of what the independent State Board of Ed does now and giving it to the Agency of Education and the politically appointed Secretary of Education, which no matter who's governor, that's a political position, right? And then last, and this is obviously something that came out of last year's property tax and budgets that were so challenging around the state, really returns Vermont to a different way of funding that we haven't done in a while, which is a foundation formula and the The number is 13 something thousand, I don't remember off the top of my head. But it doesn't necessarily change the potential tax impact across the state. And it was really unclear to me, at least as I read it, where exactly the savings would come from as individual districts, that is the huge Champlain Valley District and the smaller districts around the state, could raise additional money. And so that didn't seem to solve, to me at least, some of the problems that Vermonters have been asking for the state to help us solve. This is the map that's has been everywhere at least, of the districts, and it may be hard to see the numbers up there, but the Champlain Valley region is 34,000 students, and I believe the next biggest one is the Winooski Valley, which is 14,000 students, and again, 5 board members for each of those districts is the proposal. So the plan was amended through the House Education Committee over the past several weeks, and they passed on to Ways and Means on Friday, and I think it arrived on Monday, a new version that addresses the education portion, so not necessarily the funding portion, but the new version includes some pretty significant changes from the governor's initial bill. It changes the minimum class size, so lower than the original plan. And notably, this is class size, not staff to student ratio, as I understand it. So 12 for kindergarten, 15 for grades 1 through 4, and then 18 for 5 to 12, and I believe that was 25 under the governor's plan. It does call for consolidation. So there is a pretty strong emphasis on consolidation. They altered the size of the district as sort of a minimum ideal size of 4,000 students per district, and a school size ideal minimum of 450. There was a lot of language in there about exemptions and exceptions that could be applied for. But the one thing that they did do is extend the timeline. So they did not draw up a map. They didn't decide like exactly where the districts should be or even how many there should be. But they called for an independent committee, a subcommittee really, to propose 3 possible district consolidation maps that the legislature would then look at next year and either pick one or send it back to the drawing board. And most importantly, I think in my reading, there would be weighted voting wards for school board members. So instead of just at large for the whole district, they would try to divide proportionally to create more equity in voting for, to give a little bit of that local control back. The timetable is extended quite a bit. The governor's original plan, I think, had us moving to these 5 districts by 2027. The new proposal is by 2029, and there's a little more scaffolding built in there for elections and transitions. The independent state board of ed retains a lot of the control that they have currently, and doesn't give as much of that power over to the agency. It does still advocate for a statewide calendar, so one single calendar, and also statewide graduation requirements. So proficiency-based, as we do now, PPGRs, but statewide. One thing that I also was very interested to see is a pretty big section on school construction. So one of the things that they seemed to really take account of was in consolidating, there might be the need for building new schools that could accommodate larger numbers of students. And so there wasn't much in there about exactly how the money would, where it would come from exactly. It would be a portion of sort of state funded and district funded, but there was an awareness in that plan that school construction and building improvements are a pretty significant need in the state. It does not address the funding formula. That's not the job of the Education Committee. That is a Ways and Means. So that is where the bill is right now. On the last slide, as we get to it, there are a number of links there, and one is a link to track the bill. You could actually sign up to get updates on this bill if you want to be a nerd like me. So to move on, some quick points about school closures. Closing schools is not necessarily the solution here. So there's plenty of evidence, research that shows that closing schools can be damaging to kids. Students can lose connectedness with their peers. There's a trend towards declining family and community engagement, mental health challenges. A lot of families will turn to homeschooling out of necessity because it's too far. And that also leads to a lot of absenteeism, which I know as a teacher we already struggle with in my district, and truancy. In the short term, lower test scores, more behavioral issues. There's not necessarily a cost savings either. Again, research shows that per pupil spending tends to increase post-closure, which in order to facilitate the consolidation, which can lead to redistribution of where the money is spent. School closures generally only save money when you lay off a lot of staff. And transportation costs obviously would increase as you're transporting students over longer distances. Providing those opportunities is important, but they do cost money. So in general, closing schools also has an impact on equity and our communities. There's evidence that students who experience poverty, students of color, disabled students are most negatively impacted. Depopulation of our smaller towns, declining home values. People don't necessarily want to live in a town where there's no local school for their kids to go to. Eroding social capital, and then problems with attracting and retaining families, which we know is already a struggle that we have in this state. So at this point, I'd like to introduce and get some perspectives from some of our educators who are present, parents, and our administrator. So I'd like to bring up our Vermont Teacher of the Year, Caitlin McLeod-Bloomer, to give us her perspective.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a couple of students first.
Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm a junior at Winooski, and in elementary school, I went to South Burlington, but when I came to Winooski in 5th grade, I immediately felt at home. I thought, oh wow, there's a lot of people like me, and it made me feel comfortable and safe for the first time in school. The proposed governor's plan suggests that we move 119 districts to 5 districts. The current plan in the House suggests maybe 20 districts of 4,000 students each. Winooski would no longer exist. Instead, it would be part of one gigantic district. If this happened, we would lose everything about what makes Winooski special and unique. We would lose the feeling of safety and belonging that we feel every day. When I walk into school, surrounded by people who look like me, understand me, and support me. The Winooski district is unique in Vermont, and I want to do everything I can to save it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Afia, and I'm a junior at Winooski High School. The proposed governor's plan requires a minimum class size of 25. I can't believe to tell you how bad this is. Only once was I in a class this big. It was overstimulating and it was loud, and I didn't receive the individual attention from the teacher. In contrast, at Winooski, we often have small class sizes. This allows for teachers to connect with each and every student, make our classroom discussions feel safe and comfortable, and it's easier to build a trusting and safe classroom community. The proposed minimum class size would be absolutely detrimental to kids like me. The proposed class size minimum from the House of 18 students for grades 5 to 12 is definitely an improvement, but we still must consider how larger class sizes impact all of our students. Thank you.
When I first heard about this plan, I was confused. Nothing made sense. Is this supposed to help my school and community or change them for the worse? Winooski, a minority among Vermont schools, strives to work for the students. Our education, events, and community, down to our superintendent, we've had a say in it all. Changing the way a minority school runs to fit in with the majority should sound like the biggest red flag ever. To take away a community's ability to decide what they want to do is cruel and unreasonable. Therefore, I don't think this should have ever been proposed, and it's a shame that this is what our government thinks we need. Thank you.
My name is Caitlin. I'm a parent. I'm a teacher here at Winooski for the past 6 years and a classroom teacher for nearly 15 years. I love my job. As a public school teacher, I get to work with students like this every day and amazing colleagues. It thus saddens me when we feel like we are under attack on a federal and now a state level, when we are forced to defend what we do, beg for bare minimum resources to educate some of our neediest children, and plead for funding that are quite literally educating our future generation. All while healthcare executives are making more than ever, we know we have a problem. The proposed plan from the governor hurts the very institution it claims to want to strengthen, public education. The proposals from the House, while not final, seem to incorporate many of the most concerning elements of the governor's plan. Though we clearly have funding issues that need attention, these plans do not address them. They weaken our commitment to every student. Vermonters ask for tax relief. They ask for an immediate reduction on the tax burden. The governor's plan and the current plan in the House do not yet promise this, Simply put, neither plan promises to save money. The governor's proposed 5-district plan, as Stephanie said, will promise to close schools across the state, schools that are the bedrock of many small communities. The plan in the House promises similar consolidation, though not quite as drastic. Not only will consolidation be detrimental to these towns and these special communities like here in Winooski, but again, because of the increased cost of transportation, infrastructure, and personnel, there is no guarantee that this will save money. We have to ask then, who are these plans benefiting, as Gabby raised? It's not promising to benefit our multilingual learners. The governor's plan will drastically reduce MLL funding, and though the House weights are yet unknown, we do know that the proposed foundation formula results in stark disparities between the haves and have-nots. At Winooski, this will mean cutting our ML teachers, cutting our ML liaisons, and the loss of key positions that help to ensure students and families' well-being. Further, the proposed plan does not benefit small communities where students feel a sense of belonging, as Natalie spoke of, when they feel that they have a purpose every single day they walk into school. Our special district here would no longer exist in any of these proposed plans. When we are part of a larger district, decisions that impact our students are made by the people further from our community. Events at our school, like our district community iftar, can cease to exist. Our ability to become a sanctuary school will become much more difficult. Even our ability to fly our Black Lives Matter flag and our Pride flag can become much more fraught. Local control is better for our students. It ensures a strong, culturally responsive education where students' diversity of backgrounds and experiences and languages are seen as an asset. Our kids deserve nothing less. It's obvious that last year's voters wanted a relief to the tax burden. These current plans do not yet do that. They instead bring much harm to our students that need the most funding. As a teacher, I always keep my students at the forefront. I appreciate our legislators being here tonight, and I urge you to keep our students front and center. How are these plans helping our students here in Winooski?
Thank you, Caitlin. We're running a tiny bit behind as we started a little bit late, so I'm hoping to keep to 3 minutes for our speakers. Thank you. Thank you
I
for.
wrote it out so I could do that. Hi, I'm Katie, and I am a parent of 2 kids in the Winooski School District. But this is our first year in the Winooski School District. We moved here from Vermont last summer. So I'm basically here to share my experience in the Florida school system, which was a system that had
consolidated larger districts, incentivized school choice, and prioritized test scores. My oldest, my son, has multiple disabilities, and when he became school aged, we found out that he actually wasn't allowed to go to the local public elementary school. They had made a separate district school for kids with disabilities, so that's where he was eligible for. And it was a district school in a large district, so it was a 2-hour bus ride, and that's 20 hours a week for a 5-year-old, and it was a 5:45 a.m. pickup. He also wouldn't be in school with any of his peers in the community. So we were upset about that option, and they told us, well, then you can apply for a state voucher and go to a private school. But of course, private schools aren't really incentivized to take kids with disabilities either, so there was a lot of problems with that too. It was really only an option for rich families with stay-at-home parents because it was also 4 hours of driving commute time, and it didn't cover the full cost of tuition. And also things like physical therapy and occupational therapy, which would have been provided to the public school, would only be available if you had private insurance to cover that. They also aren't required to follow IEPs, and there's not really any accountability for what their curriculum is for kids with disabilities. So with some adjustments, we dropped him off in the mornings. He ended up going to the public school, and it was advertised as being created so that it would specialize in being a good environment for kids like him. But in reality, the teacher that he had actually had to receive a waiver to be eligible to teach him because they couldn't fill the position. The aides weren't equipped, in my opinion, to support him. He had an AAC device and no one knew how to use it, and they frequently lost it. And I could tell you many stories, but one that encapsulates how much of a bad experience it was is that I was called multiple times to pick him up because he was just sitting by the door crying. So this experience was so challenging for him and our family that it was actually one of the driving forces behind why we left Florida in the first place. It's kind of a case study to what was being told earlier. Even our friends with typical kids in the school district, which by the way, our district was one of the top districts in the state of Florida. So it wasn't like that it was just an outlier. Even kids that didn't have disabilities had frustrations with the public schools and not a lot of support from them. When our son entered the school system, you had to have special circumstances to be eligible for a voucher, but by the time we were moving here, they had actually expanded it so that anybody could apply for a voucher. Entering the school system in Vermont has been a night and day experience for us. The staff are excellent. Our son is so much happier. When he's on break, he asks how many days until school starts again. And we feel much more supported as a family. Florida, they brag about their test scores, and they would still brag about the schools that they have, but unfortunately the rhetoric and their spreadsheets don't match the experience of families there. So I would just say I feel really concerned when I hear similar rhetoric coming out of the governor of Vermont's office. And Vermont might not be perfect, but as someone who has lived other places, I can tell you that you have something special here.
Thank you. We have one more parent perspective from Palace Saporin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Palace Saporin, and I am the parent of 3 children, ages 9, 7, and 2. And I am also a former school board member, and I'm a public health professional. My family moved to Vermont in part because we believed in strong, community-centered schools. The research is clear. District consolidation and school closures often lead to lower academic performance, longer commutes, early school start times, and reduced community involvement. When we heard about district consolidation being the key component of Governor Scott's proposal, we became deeply concerned. Though the driver for this policy change is cost savings, this is by no means guaranteed. Some studies have shown that district consolidation can result in increased transportation and capital costs, potentially offsetting any initial cost savings. But beyond all of these issues, which I know you're hearing about from many people tonight, I want to highlight a crucial aspect of this debate that has largely been ignored: the impact on children with disabilities. As a parent, I know this firsthand. My oldest son is autistic, and when he started kindergarten at our local school, we were so excited But almost immediately, things went wrong. The school called daily. He had escaped the building. He had run into the road. He had to be restrained for his safety. Within a few months, the staff at the school told us that they had exhausted their resources and they did not know what to do. They had thrown all of their staff at his case, but things only seemed to be getting worse, both in their ability to keep him safe and prevent further deterioration of his mental health. Despite what I truly believe were their best efforts, they told us that they could not meet his needs and that he would need to be outplaced to a therapeutic school that could offer him a small, nurturing environment and more specialized programming. But we soon realized that in actuality, there was nowhere else for him to go. Due to a moratorium on the approval of new therapeutic schools, a string of post-pandemic school closures, and a shortage of placements, my son was sent back home to wait for a spot. We waited 2.5 years. During that time, he missed out on crucial years of his education. There was no first grade. There was no second grade. There was just a sad kid at home who waited and wondered if there were any options for him in this world. My husband had to leave the workforce to care for him full time. And we are not alone. 1 in 5 students in Vermont are on an IEP. And while we lack good state data, in other states, about 6% of these students are unable to attend their local public school due to disabilities. That could mean hundreds of Vermont families, like mine, left today without options. Now, let's talk about the governor's plan. He wants larger, standardized schools, but some students with disabilities cannot function in big environments no matter how many aides you add to the classroom. He wants minimum class sizes, but that throws inclusion out the window for kids who need smaller settings. And he is okay with longer bus rides, but some kids with sensory processing and other challenges cannot tolerate that, making school even more inaccessible. The well-known child psychologist, Dr. Ross Green, says, challenging behavior occurs when the demands and expectations being placed upon a child outstrip the skills he has to respond adaptively. By creating a one-size-fits-all model of education that cannot be adapted to suit the kids it is meant to serve, we are forcing kids to comply to our demands and expectations, ignoring the fact that for many, it might not be possible. This means more challenging behaviors and fewer kids able to thrive, both disabled and non-disabled. And what happens to the most vulnerable of our students, those who face the most difficulty meeting rigid and inflexible demands due to physical disabilities, sensory processing differences, social emotional development, trauma, or other reasons? Do we double the number of kids who can't attend their local public school? Triple it? Federal law guarantees every child a free, appropriate public education, FAPE. But Vermont is already failing to provide that to some of our most vulnerable students. This plan will only make it worse. I want to be clear, I love public schools. I want them to be well-funded, creative, and flexible enough to serve all kids. But for some students, local public school is not an option. And that's why, in addition to making sure that our local schools have the ability to be flexible to meet the needs of their communities and adapt their educational model to serve as many kids as possible, we must also invest in well-run therapeutic schools and individualized programs. My son was lucky because after 2 years of lost wages, thousands in private support, and extended family moving here from out of state to help our family out, he eventually returned back to our local public school this past fall for 3rd grade. He still needs a lot of support, including a one-on-one and a highly customized plan, but he is there and he is happy. But not all families in this state are so fortunate. Some that I know have lost their homes, had to move out of state, or seen their families fall apart. To those fighting for strong public schools, I say this, please don't forget us. If equity is truly our goal, we must fight for every child, including those who need something different. We cannot afford to make a broken system worse. Let's stand together for our communities, our public schools, and our most complex kids who deserve a chance, just like everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. was very common. Have a student, two students with disabilities myself, actually. I'd love to introduce Wilmer Javaria, superintendent here at Winooski, share a few admin perspective points.
All right. Thank you. I know we're running behind, so I'm going to skip my speech because I didn't actually have one. I have a lot of thoughts, even more thoughts now after many things that have been said. I didn't know, I did not vet all the student speeches, so let's talk about some of those things that you mentioned later. I never vet things that they do, so it's always exciting to hear what they have to say today. I just wanted to say, instead of a speech, just to make it fast, thank you for being here. Welcome to our school district. It is different than the majority of school districts in Vermont. And as many people have pointed out, that can be a good thing. And sometimes only a community knows what a community needs. And we want to keep that in mind. We also want to make sure that the plans that are being presented are not solving problems nobody's asking for to solve. We're not creating a false narrative of a crisis that doesn't exist. And we should not use very real needs and very real demands of Vermonters as vehicles to achieve things that nobody's asking for, again. And so thank you, and I look forward to lots of great conversations. Thank you for being here to all of our legislators.
Point, I think, oh, we have Stephanie from Public Assets. That's okay. No, I was.
Thanks everyone for sharing your concerns. So I just I'll try and be quick, sort of in the interest of time, but I think that the main thing I want to focus on is what all of the sort of proposals in Montpelier don't do, which in our mind is that they don't necessarily address the most pressing issues, the two most pressing issues facing public education in Vermont, which in our mind are the unfairness in who pays school taxes and the big cost drivers that drove a lot of the spending increases in the last budget cycle. So starting with the unfairness in who pays school taxes, there's two ways in which it's unfair, right? The first is that the highest income Vermonters pay a smaller share of their income in school taxes than low and middle income Vermonters. The second piece, right, is that income sensitivity is out of whack. So there are income-based adjustments, but they've gotten out of whack because the thresholds haven't been updated in decades, in some cases not since 1985, right? So a long time to go where income sensitivity is not doing what it's supposed to do. And leaning into a property-based system won't actually solve any of these problems because it retains the regressivity in that system, and it retains the unfairness in who pays. And then there's the cost drivers, right? The biggest cost drivers in the FY25 budget were teacher healthcare and inflation. And none of these plans are addressing those problems. And then there's increasing demand for mental health care services for kids as well as special ed services for kids. And that's been growing for a while, right? Even before the pandemic, that's been a growing pressure on schools. But for a long time, we had COVID relief funds that helped sort of pay for some of those costs, absorb those costs temporarily. But what's happened since, now that those dollars have gone away, is that there's still increasing pressure on schools. And I think a really important thing to note about that is that those costs don't hit all school districts the same, right? It's much harder in some districts than others to manage it. In Chittenden County, we have access to a lot of mental health care providers, so we can contract for those services. I'm not saying we're still not feeling the pressure because of the increased demand, but in rural districts, it's hitting even harder because those mental health care, they have to hire mental health care physicians, and that's a much greater cost to the school district. So it's not just that these cost drivers are out of schools' control, it's also that these cost drivers really hit districts differently. And so unless we address those two things.
This meeting is being recorded.
That are unfair, good to know, maybe it's something I'm saying. But until those two things are addressed, any of these other governance changes won't solve the problems. There's limits to what they accomplish because we haven't addressed the cost drivers and the unfairness in who pays. So, and I will tell you, there is a plan to buy down the rate for your next school tax bill. You know, that's what started this whole conversation in the first place, is the increase in tax bills. It wasn't because we were worried about how many districts we had. It was the very real, spending jumps, some of which were kind of unintended consequences, from other state policy changes that have been made in the last few years. So the bottom line is that we've got to focus on those things, setting aside any of the need for any of these, whether there's a need or not for any of these big governance changes. We've got to address those two things, or anything else we do is going to fall short or end up squeezing our schools in the way. So I think, we're really about making sure that Vermonters get to have a say at every step of the process, what good public schools look like, how to have fair taxes, and sort of preserving that community engagement, which obviously is a major feature of the Winooski schools. So, thank you
Thank you very much. So I think at this point, we would like to just have a really quick introduction from legislators who are present. We shall pass the mic. And if you could just say your name and what district you represent, and then once we gather some questions, we'll ask you to come and sit on our panel up here.
Hello, my name is Bram Klepner, and I represent the southern part of Burlington.
Hello, Winooski. I'm Daisy Bermecco. Thank you for that warm welcome. I represent you proudly, hopefully most of you in the room. It's good to see you all tonight.
Hi, everybody. Does this work? Yes. I'm Martine LaRoque-Ulick, and thank you. I live in Burlington. I represent Chittenden Central, which is most of Burlington, all of Winooski, Essex Junction, all of Essex Junction, a little bit of Essex Town, and a little bit of Colchester. I'm also on the Burlington School Board. I'm a former educator, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Tanya Bihovsky. I also represent the Chittenden Central District, and I am also really happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, and good evening, everyone. My name is Chloe Tomlinson, and I represent Winooski in the House alongside Daisy. I think we have some.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Keisha Rom Hinsdale. I'm the Senate Majority Leader, and I represent the southern half of Chittenden County. I also sit on Senate Education, and my 2-year-old is in the library right now, so if I have to leave early, I apologize. And I see Senator Matos up there.
I'll try to project.
The mic is coming to you.
There's a lot of teaching voices in this room, but for the Zoom and the recording, we're asking.
Hi, I'm Chris Matos. I'm state senator in the Chittenden North District, just above you here, Milton, Westford, Fairfax, part of Essex Town, and piggybacking on Senator Ron Hinsdale. My 2-year-old's at home, so I'm gonna sneak out here in a little bit to get him to bed for the night. But thanks for having us all here tonight, and I appreciate everybody's insights on the governor's plan and the House's plan. So thank you.
Have we missed anyone?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Taylor. I am actually on the House Education Committee. I represent Chittenden, Milton, and a small sliver of Georgia. Thank you.
Great. I am so excited to see so many of you here. I know that your schedules are a little last minute, and it's hard to know if you'll be able to come, and I think we're all really appreciative to see our legislators here in person. We do have, I think, at least one joining via Zoom. Is that correct? I believe that she is in listening mode tonight. Kate Logan, thank you very much. Okay, so I think we're going to take a couple minutes to kind of gather up the questions that you have either left on the, we're all ready to go. Wonderful. So we've gathered up questions that you've left on the posters out front. If you have Post-its that you have written questions on, we have those too. We have a couple, okay. You can always come up with more questions, that's absolutely fine. I think what we're going to do is kind of gather questions together just in the interest of time and not sort of respond to each one, but kind of gather up a few questions that have been shared and then ask our legislators to come and sit. I don't know if we have enough chairs for all of you, or sit or stand and decide, if one of you feels like you'd like to answer one of those questions, then we can have space for that. Sound okay? Yes, if you have a question, we're going to ask you to line up at the mic here. So a question that you didn't write down but you'd like to ask in person, if you could line up at the mic, and that way we can make sure to give as many people as possible the ability to voice their questions. Yeah, we'd really, can you please try to keep it to 2 minutes? I apologize, there's so much to talk about, but trying to be respectful of everyone's time.
I think we're ready for the legislators to join the panel if you are.
Please come up. It looks like we have found some more chairs for you all. And we will pass you a mic. We have the supplies. Okay, I think we are going to start. I've learned that something may have been I didn't understand or miscommunicated, and we have a little correction to clarify.
Thank you for those policy wonks out there. If you're interested in like the nitty gritty of ed policy and stuff like that, I think I heard you say that the State Board of Education is like an independent body.
I meant it was independently, like.
So it used to be quite independent, but when we moved from a Department of Ed to an agency of ed, it became a body that is actually put together by the governor. The governor appoints members of the board. So right now, all of the members of the State Board of Education are actually appointees of Governor Scott. So I definitely wouldn't say it's independent. What is nice about having a state board is that they are responsible to the public. So their meetings are warned, their meetings are public. You can ask questions, you can go to the meetings. What the governor's plan had was that the state board would go away. So it was really that outward-facing, public-facing body was removed. It has been put back in to the House bill in a different form. In the House bill, it would be put together by the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the governor. So it would be like a coordinated effort. It would be much more, I think, fair, frankly, in terms of representation. But anyway, thank you for letting me clarify that.
That's really helpful. And when I looked at the new plan, I did see that it was not just appointed by the governor, but there would be some more diversity in there.
But you got a lot right. And
Thank you
really
so much. I cut some time out of my social studies, like to try to understand the legal language. Questions? Let's start.
Hi everyone, my name is Shane Abrams. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an educator and a Williston resident. I've sourced 3 questions from out in the hallway that people left on their way in, and 1 bonus question. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm going to block these, so just share all of them at once, and you don't have to respond to all of them. Please pick 1 or 2 that you want to respond to. The first question is about the timeline of this change. Why are we rushing such a huge shift without deep consideration of unintended consequences? Several people are pretty interested in healthcare. Why is healthcare not being addressed in this moment? Why is no one tackling those costs? One is a practical question about community engagement. How do we get more community members involved and aware of what's happening? And then the bonus question is, which schools do you think Phil Scott wants to close?
Anyone like to, I have a mic. Anyone want to tackle a piece of that?
I can talk a little bit about maybe the timeline. Being on the House Education Committee, we did a lot of talking about the timeline, and I think the reason in the governor's proposal it was so short is the urgency to stabilize the education funding system. I know that there's a lot of talk about hopefully decreasing costs. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen, just like probably most of the people in the room here. I think we're working more towards stabilizing the system so we don't see those big 25% increases like we did a year ago. So I think it was the urgency to try to stabilize that system for the taxpayers to make sure, we can fund the education system.
Do you want to do it? Should we stay on timeline as ends? Go to healthcare, so we're not. Yeah. So being on Senate Education and actually having left Senate Finance to go to Senate Education, because we often make our education policy work for our tax policy rather than the other way around, or we don't really make the education policy work at all. I want to say something about a grave concern I would have in talking about finding savings in the next 2 years. When we buy down the property tax rate artificially, which is what the governor is proposing for the next 2 years, it actually spikes after that because you have to make up for all of the artificial cost savings and all of the taxes that weren't paid, and you've eaten up your reserves. So we are agreeing with the governor to buy it down this year, but that is to buy us time for a foundation formula to come into place that at least in the House's policy right now, and I believe we have Senate Finance represented here, we will agree is a lot more generous and actually begins with more of the budget that people currently have and are expecting. But that means we have to do tax reform quickly in order to change who pays and how much they pay, because even if we agree to buy down the property tax rate this year, the responsible thing to do would be to make sure that we are not making the same payers now pay a much higher rate in 1 to 2 years. So I think we have an urgent timeline for financial reform. I will say, I think once we look at the foundation formula that is more generous and a system with construction dollars that starts to help districts make their own financial decisions, we may not need to lead on district consolidation at all. I think we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach that is going to work. And it may not be something that we ultimately have to do is try to draw lines around communities because that could just be more costly and quite inefficient. So I think people should wait to see. Yeah, that map is dead also. The maps are dead. I think it's fair to say. I can say that. The maps are dead. Yes, you could. If you want to be Nancy Pelosi right now, you can rip it up. It is dead. Yeah, died yesterday.
Wow, okay, see, this is...
Yes, both are dead.
Yeah, this is the Senate one. Timeline, anyone want to speak on timeline?
Yeah, so I think Senator Hinsdale speaks really clearly to why this timeline has been so sped up, but I don't think that what the governor's plan is addressing is answering the right problem. There was incredible and understandable frustration at the cost to people who can't afford to pay more. But to Steph's point, there is a huge swath of people that can afford to pay more. And so what we need to be doing and doing quickly is transitioning to a system of education funding that asks the people who can afford to pay. When I look at, thank you. And frankly, this is a discussion that we've been having for over a decade in Vermont about moving to a system that looks at income and not property value. And so we can provide immediate tax relief to those who need it most while asking those who are paying a fraction of a percentage of their income to pay to make that up. We don't need to buy down taxes for millionaires. I think enough of that is happening at the federal level. We don't need to do it in Vermont. But I think artificially, the onus or the focus has been put on the governor's plan on vast structural changes that we don't even know if they're going to save money. So what we need is lots of public support for, there's a House bill and a Senate bill that would move us to income-based funding. And so I think that starting to hear from people that they support that is going to be really important in transitioning the conversation.
Interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that we hit other questions. We've talked about the timeline quite a bit. Was there something else that got missed? Oh, healthcare. Yes.
Daisy can also do healthcare because she's on the healthcare committee. But yes, I'm sorry, but there's not a lot of good news in healthcare. Blue Cross Blue Shield is likely going to be asking for another 15% increase this year, which I know it's really rough there, and you know that they're not doing all that well. They're kind of on the verge of insolvency. So the healthcare system writ large is struggling, is a very nice word. But we are trying to shore it up. We have some long-term plans that we're working on, as well as short-term sort of emergency stopgap measures. But I agree with what Stephanie said, which is it is a huge cost driver in education, and it cannot be ignored. Unfortunately, it really hasn't been taken care of in the way it has needed to over the last several years since the pandemic. So until we can really address the cost drivers, we're not going to see a lot of change. We're also working on reference-based pricing as a bill that we're looking at in health and welfare, which will, it's a little bit complicated, but it'll give us more stability in the system. It'll be linked to Medicare rates. So it will certainly help us stabilize our healthcare system. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up as a cost driver, Daisy.
I think thank you so much for recognizing what a significant factor in the cost of education that healthcare is. I know it's also a significant factor in everyone's lives. Staff salary and bonuses actually make up approximately a third of school budgets. And why is that? It's because insurance costs have increased exponentially since 2015. Because the cost of delivering the healthcare has increased exponentially since 2015. So what we're doing on the healthcare committee in the House, and we work very closely with the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare, is we've done a lot this session so far to address the rising costs of drugs, which make up the largest bulk of the cost of your health insurance. We have done that through a bill that we passed on retaining Vermont pharmacies' rights to the 340B drug prescription program, which gives us access to reduced prescription drugs. We are addressing private equity in Vermont. So we recognize that our hospital system right now is very fragile financial footing. So to prevent people from coming in and making profit off of that situation, we are looking at where our risks are around it. We've also done a large bill around some of the hospital regulatory actions that we can take to further strengthen the hospital system. And we've given Green Mountain Care Board a little bit more leverage to step in when a facility is experiencing, I think it's 100 or 135 days or less cash on hand, because we actually have a large amount of healthcare providers in Vermont who are down to double-digit days cash on hand, which is pretty scary. So
if it's okay, can I turn to the audience for more questions?
Please.
Thank you. Please line up if you've got a question. I see we've already got one right here, but behind the microphone, I want to be just respectful of everyone's time and make sure our audience can ask some questions.
Hi.
Are we on?
Hello.
We have helpers.
At the power. Hello?
There you go.
I should go into technology. All right. Hi. So I have a quick question. I want to give like 30 seconds of context for why I'm asking it, and then I hope you can speak to the question. So the context is my family moved here to Vermont from Fairfax County, Virginia. And a lot of the things we're hearing said about like the Chittenden School District or like the districts in Chittenden rather, were said about the Fairfax County School District. They would say like, oh, there's too many focuses on ESL programs. Oh, you know, there's too many languages spoken at home that aren't English. And it resulted in a lot of people like initially moving out of Fairfax, including my family, which I do not agree with. But what's done is done. I was 2 months old, so I didn't have much to say. But anyway, so they kept claiming that like, you know, these programs are going to be like a huge tax burden. It was going to be like, it's going to like affect property values, this, that, and the third. And then obviously looking at Fairfax County's school district today, that hasn't been the case at all. It's been really beneficial for the economy. There hasn't been any increase beyond like anything else in the DC metropolitan area for like property taxes. And they could obviously improve, like you mentioned, like an income-based approach would be better. They do reduce state funding to wealthier areas because they can raise that locally from income taxes. And so my question is, seeing that the history of this happening and the history of consolidation across Vermont and Nebraska over and over has shown this doesn't bring any savings. The history has shown that investing in these individualized programs, avoiding consolidation, ultimately, from a purely calculating point of view, is good for an economy. What is the claim that Phil Scott is saying will actually come in savings from doing this? Like, what is the basis whatsoever in actual savings that is being claimed here? Because none of the things that I've seen proposed in this plan have any historical backing for showing anything other than like a very short-term savings, like you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for bringing up multilingual learners and English learners and all of the students who spoke, because this is a really scary time to be outspoken. It's just a really scary time to be outspoken, to put your name on articles, to post on social media, to be on Zoom. So I just want to speak to the bravery of everyone who's here, and especially those who are thinking about those who cannot be in the room right now. So it's much appreciated. And we are really focused on you all. And somebody said, how can we get involved? That was one of the questions. House Education, and at least myself, I'm working on Senate Education, are working on a student hearing during the April break. I don't know if everyone has the same April break, but we're looking at like the 24th, 25th. I'm trying to have a hearing for teachers, if you can believe it. We have not heard from any teachers in Senate Education, and we've heard from maybe a couple principals. To your question, I can't tell you what's in the governor's head, but there is a false notion put forward of what savings are, and the savings are cuts. The savings are a much lower per pupil spending amount that goes to the districts of $13,200. That isn't, there is weighting involved in that, but that wasn't a particularly careful number. The way the governor is able to say $180 million of savings is to create these large districts, come up with a proportion of staff needed and teachers needed and educators and administrative staff at each school, and build that into their 13,200 number. I can only speak to CVSD because their business manager explained to me that would be a 20% budget cut. If that foundation formula went into place. So it is not savings, it's $180 million of cuts. And that's the only place that they are looking, and why they're insisting on district consolidation, which really has nothing to do with that low foundation formula. They can be two very separate conversations, but that's why you're seeing the House start with a foundation formula that's much higher, that meets where we are now and may step down or may just stay level. But that would be a separate question. And district consolidation, truly, no one has come forward with ideas of how you get savings there.
So it's not looking at like any other factor like the economy. Specifically, what we're spending now would be not spending in the future. And that's
right. That's exactly right.
The other thing that you brought up that was a really good point that we're going to have to grapple with, and Senator Matos is on the Finance Committee with me, but what about when you have a foundation formula, what about districts that want to spend above the foundation formula? What do we do there? That's why we had Brigham in the first place all those years ago, was to try to equalize the playing field. And all I can say is that I'm so happy you all are here, and we're going to need like 100 more of this size group to make an impact to save public education right now. We're going to have to knock on doors. We're going to have to be on street corners making a fuss. We're going to need more of you speaking up, because it is scary and dire. I'm not sleeping well at night. Probably all of us are having trouble sleeping, but this is existential. It's a crisis that I'm very concerned about, but I know we have another question.
Yeah, you're talking about existential crisis. My heart just started. So I'll try to be succinct here. I'm a little skeptical. So when I hear that the financial realities for Vermonters is the driving force behind this plan, I have to wonder what sort of ideological, I think, thoughts about education are really behind this idea as well. So I'm wondering that, and I'm wondering how that will impact the incredible amount of work that Vermonters, especially the Act One Working Group, have done to put forward ideas and reforms to the education quality standards that would be moving us towards more equitable systems, more robust supports for students, answering what we've known since 1999 about pervasive issues related to our students who are historically underserved, thriving in our schools, and addressing real issues of harassment, specifically racial harassment in our schools. This plan does not allow us to answer the call of the new reforms to the education quality standards. It just won't allow us to do that well. I guess that's not
I just want to say, to me, one of the most important jobs that the Agency of Education could have would be to go into schools that are facing bullying and harassment issues and fix the problems, instead of sitting in Montpelier and doing whatever they're doing. Go to those schools and help the administrators, help the teachers deal with the situation. And that is not happening, and it's certainly not going to happen as the whole AOE moves to help do this transformation. I don't know how they're going to be doing their actual work, but I really appreciate what you said, and I don't have to tell you, we have a system that is inequitable, and I'm sure people are watching, but we do have private schools in this state that are publicly funded. They do receive public funds. They do not accept all students. They do discriminate. And I'll tell you, one of those schools had a hearing last week, and there were about 600 people there to preserve the privilege that they have to attend that school that is not equitable and is discriminatory. And we all need to be paying attention to that too. I'm getting two hands.
So I want to say that I think you are right to question the ideology here. This is not the first time we have seen a plan similar to this from this governor. Last time there was no huge tax increase, but so now there is a crisis to attach the push for an ideological shift in our education system, and we simply cannot let that happen. We can address the financial issues that Vermonters called us to address without wholesale bulldozing our schools. Our public schools are the bedrock and foundation of our democracy and of our society. We simply must invest in them.
I'll just say quickly, because I don't want it to get lost, that we do need to focus on education policy. I've been asking for hearings on racial harassment and literacy and all kinds of education policies that we should be addressing. That's one of the reasons you heard me say the map is dead, because I went to the education committee to do education policy, and I'm not a map maker. And that was going to consume the entire rest of our session. So just yesterday, we began opening up a lot of space to talk about special education and inclusivity. And so I will try to bend the conversation in that direction. And when we invite people in for hearings, I hope you will do the same.
You've met all of us, but I'd really like to know a little bit more about who you are. Can you raise your hand if you are staff at this school or another school? keep your hand up if you have kids and add your hand if you're a parent of a student in the district. Or any other district, Chittenden. And then raise your hand, put your hands down. You can take a rest, yeah, right there. Raise your hand if you are a community member in Chittenden County who just cares about kids. Talking about you, George Cross. Thank you. I think that's really helpful when I'm taking notes about how this community feels and also about who's not here. I think that's an important thing to note. I would like to see more students here. I understand that not a lot of parents can be here. I'm sacrificing time with my 2 kids right now to be here since we like to brag about being moms. And I think we have to imagine how we can get our kids in this space. Because like you said, you went to a place where there were 600 people advocating to take away those rights. And I think the youth in this school inspire me so much. It's the reason that I moved to Winooski was because we looked at the student body and we thought, oh my gosh, our kids have to grow up in this world. And I just implore you, if you care about this community and you understand that the diversity in this community is our strength, please be sure and keep our youth in the conversation.
Thank you very much. Are there any remaining, we could probably take one more remaining question either from Zoom or from...
Yeah, hi. Senator Vahovsky, you mentioned, I think a lot of the conversation, I really was not going to speak, but I resonate with what Katie was talking about. I'm from Florida. I moved to Vermont. I chose Vermont for public education, moved my entire family here. And everything Katie said is absolutely true. A lot of what I feel for the past 5+ years that I've been here have been on the back foot against. You mentioned 2 bills that we can be for and that we need to look at. So I want to know what we need to advocate for.
I'm just gonna stack a question. I'm gonna stack one question in. Someone from Zoom asked, when should educators come to Montpelier to speak? Can legislators send information and invites to inviting teachers? Yeah, and that union leaders will do their best to get people there.
There's is this working? Okay, there. There's always the opportunity to email different committees. If you want to come down and testify, absolutely email committees, email the vice chairs, email the full committees. If you have a certain subject that you'd like to talk about, or if you know that there's a bill that's hanging on a wall that you really want to see move forward, absolutely. Your voice matters. It matters a lot more than sometimes the people sitting around the tables in the committee rooms. So reach out, please. You can drive the conversation a lot more than you think you can.
So those of us who are educators could get a group of students, email you and
You can absolutely email.
work something out.
Yeah. I'm not guaranteeing that it's going to work within a time frame, but absolutely email.
And I would just add that contact your representatives in the House and your senators in the Senate and the governor's office. It is, if we get, on hot issues, we'll get, a few dozen people contacting us. On many issues. 5 feels like a lot, and will have a meaningful impact on your representatives and what they're advocating for in the legislature.
So, the question to what bill should we support?
Yes, because Senator Vahovsky mentioned the 2 bills, so I want to know what those were.
Oh yeah, well can I give another bill because everybody knows what I'm about to say. I say this at every school board meeting I go to as well, housing. We have multiple housing bills and we will not solve any of these problems, not healthcare, not school, not property taxes, not anything unless we build more housing, and there's 2 reasons why. Number one, there is not enough housing for people, right? That's the more obvious one. So we have fewer kids in our schools, we have fewer people working. We have seniors who are holding on to their large single-family home because there is no senior housing for them to move into at a cost that they cannot afford. Two, and I wrote an article about this, and it's something that we don't talk enough about. The main reason people are so upset this year is because a lot of people had reappraisal. When there is no housing stock, the value of their home went up more than it has in all of recorded tax history. We have seen the largest delta in the price of homes. I'm looking at you, Larry, and Charlotte, because God knows they need to build more housing in Charlotte. We need to build infrastructure and housing, or we will not have enough payers for our health insurance system, and we will not have enough students in our schools. And that is the root problem of all of this. We will not change that conversation in Montpelier until we grow our population. I hope everyone reads Ezra Klein's Abundance and starts thinking about how we can actually win for people and make our cost of living go down and our quality of life go up.
So this is going to answer the how to get involved and the what bill question, and I can't speak to the House bill because there's just a lot of them. H454. No, not the right one. Never mind. So I think call your legislators, call the governor, email your legislators. If you are able, come to the State House and ask for a meeting. We often talk about legislators as people in positions of power. You have lent us that power, and if we are not doing what is right, take it back. Demand those conversations. The income-based funding bill in the Senate is S104, and it is on the wall in Senate Finance. So reach out to your senators, reach out to the senators on Senate Finance if that is something you support, and advocate for it. When some of these big issues have come up and we get hundreds of emails, we listen, we're forced to, and keep doing stuff like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I give the phone number so people know how to reach these folks?
Yes, so here we have this QR code. I put together a number of links. One is the Find Your Legislator on the state website, and you just put in your town and it'll give you both your senators and representatives, and that'll give you their email, their phone number. There are links to some of the things we talked about tonight, the contents of the bill and the original bill and the amendment. There's a link to send an email. There's a template you can use if you're not sure what to say. There's some suggestive language in there. There's a little bit more about what Steph from Public Assets explained about the proposed tax options and some other stuff on there. So there's a one-stop shop QR code and all of these lovely people. Thank you so much for coming. Their contact information is there.
Call the governor too. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't forget that
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
Call the governor about unhousing a bunch of people because that is going to drive up the cost in our schools because the schools are going to have to take care of those kids' needs.
Can we remind everyone in the room that the Democrats still have a majority of the House, the Democrats still have a majority in the Senate. The governor won this year because of the property tax increase and basically nothing else. And he also signed the bill that led to part of it. They didn't talk about the Waitings bill, or maybe did before I got here, which was another big piece of it. And Senator Vihovsky called it 3 years ago when that bill passed and said if you increase the ability to spend without increasing the resources to cover it, taxes are going to go through the roof and they're going to lose in the legislature. And that's exactly what happened. But the legislature, you have the majority, make it louder, make it stronger, deal with taxes. There are 1,000 taxpayers in Vermont who have incomes over $1 million. There are 2,500 that have incomes over 500,000. There are 50 to 60,000 second homeowners. It's about taxes. Address that, and a lot of the rest of this destruction of public education will go away. Be loud, be strong, stand up for us.
Be loud. I like that. Thank you so much for rounding us out.
Yeah, thank you, friends, everybody, for coming. I'm the librarian for the Winooski School District, and I love my job. I love this school. I feel privileged every day to come in and work with my colleagues and to work with these amazing people right here. Schools are really the heart of our communities, and I feel like everybody sort of feels like this. And now is the time, now is a real pivotal time in public education in Vermont. This is not an opportunity for us to wait and see what happens in the future and try to fix it down the road. Now is our opportunity. Some of the decisions that are getting made right now are going to have impacts for decades. So now it's time to get involved. So this event was organized by an organization called Vermont Schools Workers United. We would love to have you join our email list. If you're a union member, we would love to have you join and help us organizing more events like this. And yeah, keep in touch with these people right here. Stay involved, and thank you all so much for coming. We still got plenty of snacks out there, time for lingering. Again, thank you everybody for coming. This was really wonderful. People support public education. Thank you.